but the single talk track that I recommend that I've used for 60,000 outbound cold calls, and this works for any product, any industry, because I've personally used it to sell software, over $1 million in recurring revenue, and now over $50,000 in pharmaceutical containers and medical supplies. So it works. And we'll do a brief role play.
Okay. I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create a life of freedom and impact through success in sales and the pursuit of self-development. Our guest today, Trent Dressel, is someone I respect and admire, and someone who I consider a friend now that he's moved to Austin, Texas. He helps people start their career in sales, develop their cold calling skills, and create a life of freedom and impact by being more successful in sales and entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about what it takes to get into tech sales, what it takes to be a great cold caller, and what Trent's been up to lately, and what he's been learning about the mindset required to create a life that gets you up in the morning. In fact, shout out to Brian Forbes, who lives in my community, that I was talking to this morning, that said Trent helped him transition into tech sales, and he just got promoted to AE thanks to all Trent's tips on cold calling, breaking in, everything tech sales. All right, Trent, let's dive into it. Welcome to Austin. It's so good to have you. What are your thoughts on Austin so far?
Man, I absolutely love it. Literally the second day I was here, we met up at the gym right across from the street in this complex. We did exactly what you think people do in Austin. We did a cold plunge to start the day. We were pushing sleds around. We got coffee and breakfast tacos after. I love the energy, the spirit, the opportunities in this town. I've only been here about 24 days, but I love it so far.
Yeah, man, you've been killing it so far. Just getting started. It's a special place. It's a special place. It's an entrepreneurial, creative place, and people are super warm and friendly. So recently, haven't you been learning a lot about the mindset required to be successful? I saw a video on 10 tips to really shift your life overnight and like improve your life. And I'm curious, after crushing it in tech sales, but now expanding on to entrepreneurship more broadly, working for your parents' company, creating a great brand on YouTube, what are some of your top mindset tips to shift your life overnight?
To catch people up on my story, and this will play into these tips specifically, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Upon graduation in 2018, I moved myself to Dallas, Texas to start my software sales career as a bottom of the totem pole sales development representative.
Yep.
Never had a connection, no experience, no internships. I really did not know what I would be doing day one. They handed me a headset and they said, "You're going to be cold calling for a living, figure it out." And it was really challenging at first. So all of the experience I share here today and lessons are based on my actual lived experiences and what I've gone through, not just something I read in a book. So I worked my way up at that tech company, that software company, promoted 6 times, 4x my income, 60,000 outbound cold calls, ended up getting fired, approaching my 5th year at the company, which we can get into later today if you want. Very valuable lessons learned from that particular experience. So that literally caused me to rethink what I wanted and who I was, my self-identity. It resulted in me moving to Denver, Colorado for a month. That was short-lived. Didn't really like the mountains and the altitude too much, or trying to be a solopreneur. So I moved back to Columbus, Ohio, where all of my family's at and our family wholesale business is based. Spent the last few months learning the ropes there, and recently moved myself to Austin, Texas to really plant my roots and set up shop here. And I'd say from a lesson standpoint, you're right. I posted a recent video, 10 ways and specific actions and processes that I've learned to reinvent yourself, to get unstuck, to change your life overnight. And I'd say of that list, what really resonates with me is changing your settings. As a result of someone listening to this here today, the number one thing they can do to immediately change their momentum and trajectory is to simply change your settings, whether that looks like moving out of your parents' house like me, moving a half mile down the street to live by yourself, completely moving cities to reinvent yourself. You automatically can build momentum and reshape your identity by changing where you live in your environment. And that has been so important to me throughout my journey, moving consecutively for the last 9 years straight.
Dang, man. What is it about, making a change that sparks growth?
Most people, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, they never really move beyond the confines of where they grow up at. If you look at the statistics, it's like 60-70% of people never live beyond 25 miles of where they end up growing up at. And that could be a variety of reasons. But me personally, I'm one that wants to take risk. I feel like by putting myself in uncomfortable situations, by seeking out hard and challenging activities, it will force growth and force me to evolve and develop a wider perspective and to become more dangerous, more valuable to the marketplace. And I feel like that's helped me meet new people and get in the right situations in the rooms to make more money and to broaden my perspective and hopefully live a more fulfilled life.
So we talked one off on an internal locus of control and the importance of that in life. You know, could you expand on, like, what does that mean to you?
We were walking over to this studio to record. It's raining. We're walking down the middle of the street, and I say, Chris, we got to carry our own weather around with us. And what that means is we can't control the weather. We can't control how we look. We can't control our last name.
Damn good.
Yeah, well, fortunately we both look good, but not everyone can be as lucky as us. But you can't control your natural talent. You can't control your experience. What can you control? And this gets down to the concept in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is be proactive in your circle of influence. So think about what is in your circle of influence. You can't control if you get in a car accident. If someone runs into the back of your car, you can't control that. But you can control how you respond to it. You can control what you can control. So focus on what is in your circle of influence. And that's how you respond to events. That's how you show up. And a specific story for this as it relates to salespeople, when I used to drive into the office up in Plano for my software sales career, when it would be bad weather or when it would be raining, I knew people would come in a bit later than normal. I knew people would come in and say, man, that traffic getting in here sucked. And I'd be thinking in the back of my head, I'm making 100 calls today just because other people are going to take their foot off the gas because they're using the weather as an excuse today. So you can extrapolate the weather out to all sorts of different circumstances. Oh, I grew up in a challenged household. Parents got divorced. Oh, I got fired. Life is so unfair. Or you can use these circumstances as fuel to motivate you to be more successful. And that's how I choose to look at life.
Yeah. I've heard it said that the last of the human freedoms, the greatest, is the ability to choose our perspective, respond to circumstances. And you embody that, man. And how much has like just sweat equity and bias for action like played a role in your success?
If you were to be an investor, so let's say I'm an investor and Chris is big money over here, a sovereign wealth fund. And I go to Chris and I'm going to say, hey, Chris, I want some of your money so I can invest in companies. He's going to say, okay, well, what makes you different? Why should I give you money instead of that other guy who wants my money? You're going to have to provide your X factor. And I've always viewed my X factor as someone that's willing to do the things that other people don't want to do. So what does that look like in an actual sales career? That's okay. Well, people don't like making cold calls. So I realized early on, cold calling's never going away. AI isn't going to come in and make my calls for me. Maybe it's going to take my job, but if I'm great at cold calling, I'm not going anywhere. So I decided I'm going to get as good at cold calling as I possibly can. And that's just one example of controlling the controllables, because my first month as a sales development rep, I was bottom of the leaderboard out of 34 people. Imagine that. You're starting to question, is sales for me? Do I actually want to be doing this? Do I belong here? Should I retreat? Should I move back home? Should I get in a less competitive industry that's not going to require as much of me? I realized in that moment, all I could do was decide to outwork the people around me. And if you go back and ask anyone I've ever worked with, anyone I've ever been on their team, I guarantee you they'll say, look, I may have liked the guy, I may have didn't like the guy, I may have respected him, I may have XYZ, but I guarantee you they'll say, that guy had an engine, that guy had a motor. I was someone that was always showing up, willing to put in more effort than those around me. And that intangible trait is what allowed me to be successful in corporate America. And I'm now reinventing what that means to myself beyond the confines of working a W-2 job and trying to apply it in different ways, because you need to work smart and hard. But that's always been my foundation for success, being willing to do what other people are unable or can't do.
Come on now. You know what? There's a famous piece of sales literature by Albert Ian Gray called The Common Denominator of Success. And he says that successful people make a habit of doing the uncomfortable things that failures aren't willing to do. You took a page out of that famous piece of sales literature, and I don't even know if you knew it. Had you heard of that?
I haven't heard of it, but I've heard of something similar by Jeff Bezos. And he said, when we think in terms of planning, we look through the paradigm of what is not going to change. We know people want fast delivery. We know people want low prices. We know that's never going away. So we're going to build our business on the basis of those values. So as you think about as a sales professional, what traits will never go out of style? They say sales is a numbers game. And if you decide to increase your top of funnel inputs, daily activities, that will lead to more success, no matter who you are, no matter what you sell. If you make more calls, if you send more emails, if you are able to generate more leads, it will result in more success for you, guaranteed. It's very simple.
So I've seen some posts where you're pretty humble and you're like basically saying I'm not the most talented person and yet I still can make it happen. And I think you're an extremely talented person. But to this end, what are some of the other things outside of like work ethic that can make up for a lack of talent? Because I feel like you talk about that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but what are some of those qualities?
I heard a story about a high performance trainer that went to go study Kobe Bryant, and he came across, it wasn't Tim Grover. I know that's a whole path on performance with that guy, but he ran into Kobe at a conference and he said, Kobe, I would love to come watch you practice. Can I do that? And Kobe said, sure, meet me at the gym tomorrow at 5 a.m. And this guy's traveling, so he says, okay, let me really impress Kobe. This morning, I'm going to get in early. I'm going to get in at 4:30 and make sure I beat Kobe to the gym. Whenever he shows up to the gym, Kobe's already there. Kobe's already working out. Kobe doesn't even acknowledge him. He's watching Kobe, and he realizes for the first hour of this training session, Kobe's not even dribbling a ball. He's not even shooting. He's not even doing what you would think a basketball player does. So after the conclusion of the practice, he goes up to Kobe and says, Kobe, how do you think about training? Like, what were you doing? You weren't even playing basketball. And he said, I was just focusing on my footwork because I really care about the fundamentals, because by doing that, that's what will separate me from other people. Doing the small details, focusing on, okay, well, let me make sure I'm making my calls in the morning before I check my email. Let me make sure I don't sign off early on a Friday afternoon to go to happy hour when I should look back at the week about what went well and didn't go well. Hey, I know I got to get this follow-up out today to the customer I met with earlier, but you know what? They'll be fine if I send it to them tomorrow. So it's all about the little things, and it's all about the fundamentals. So I don't always bring the most experience to any room I'm in. I don't bring the best industry perspective. I don't bring the funniest jokes. I don't bring the best insights. But what I can bring is my full self. So I'm going to show up and I'm going to focus on the intangibles that I believe will differentiate me now and hopefully over time.
Yeah. So the little things really add up. And you also reminded me of the preparation and its importance. Like, how much would you prepare before a discovery call, or how much research would you put into a company? And I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe you just wing it. And I don't think that's the case, but it kind of reminded me of what you're saying with Kobe, is like preparing and building up to something. Is there something to that?
I'm a game time player, Chris. When the
really?
lights come on, I show up. I don't like to over prepare.
Okay. Because
what I learned early on is if I structure out all these great medic questions, if I do all this research, it's helpful, and I'll do that to an extent. But it's similar to a fight. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So if you've got this planned out route of questions I'm going to ask, all of a sudden your customer will say something different. Yeah. You won't even have heard them because you're focused on what you're going to ask next, and then you're off track, and then you're sort of playing catch up. So I think about this in terms of preparation outside the office. I believe your business life is a reflection of your personal life. So I'm focused on getting 8 hours of sleep, drinking a ton of water, stretching my body. I don't watch TV. I don't drink. I don't gamble. I don't do any drugs. I don't have toxic relationships for the most part. And I literally, as I was telling you before this, I literally just have a mattress in my apartment because I'm focused on living as simple as possible. There is nothing that's going to upset me outside the office, so that when I'm showing up day to day, I'm there focused, ready to perform at my peak ability. And what I've observed in a lot of people I've worked with is they have vices that actually hold them back, so that when they show up in the office, man, I got lost in that show last night, and they'll walk in and say, man, I'm tired today. Man, I don't feel good today. And I'll say, well, what happened? And they'll say, well, I stayed up late last night. Okay, you didn't get enough sleep. So how are you going to perform at your peak level and compete with someone like me over the course of a 50-year time horizon. You're eventually going to reach a point where you plateau. So I structure my life in a way where I'm always preparing so that I can show up every day. Some days I'll work out for 15 minutes, but I'm going to work out every day. So I know that I can sustain that level of activity. So it's all about staying ready. I'm always in shape. I tell people I'm ready to run a marathon today because I always stay in shape. And it applies to work as well.
This is already one of my favorite insights of this conversation. We're going to hit on a lot more. But that was awesome. You know, you took a question about preparation for, say, a cold call or a discovery call and turned it into how to create a context in your life in which you're always prepared to show up as your best self and to not overanalyze. That's a trap I fall into sometimes. And I remember when I was at Google Cloud, I had a call with a customer. I prepared so much on a value hypothesis related to their Data V software solution. And I talked to the CEO, and the first thing he says after a little chit chat is we're pivoting away from Data V and becoming a services company. So to your point, everything I prepared was out the window.
And that's the oh shit moment, because you instantly realize, oh shit, we got to completely change what we're doing.
But what you're saying is that, let's say in theory, I'm getting a good night's sleep, I'm working out, I'm taking care of myself, maybe practicing gratitude, whatever things I need to do, rituals to show up as my best self. In that moment, I am present and able to dance and be in the moment and just perform at a peak level. So really good insight. I have a couple more mindset questions. I'm bucketing it into mindset, but it's overall living a good life. And then we'll talk a little bit about breaking into tech sales, cold calling, and go from there. So one of your tips in that recent video that we alluded to was, I think it was something like act from a place of indifference or something like that. Can you talk about that point?
Let's start with a cold call. And this is what people love, this insight that I'm about to share with you. Most people are worried about picking up the phone, and the fear of what could happen is worse than what actually happens. So most people will sit there, similar to me when I first started cold calling. I remember in the early days, I'd be sitting there, I'd be looking at my Salesforce page, I'd be looking at the company website, I'd be looking at the prospect LinkedIn page, and I'd be prepared. And then I remember the SDR next to me who had been there 9 months longer. She said, "Hey, Trent, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm preparing." She said, No, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be making calls." And then that's when it clicked in my head where I realized all that matters is actually making the call. And in order for me to be more successful, I need to press call, and then I will figure out what to say while it's ringing. Some people at this point will say, well, if I'm calling enterprise accounts, I got 2 accounts, I need to make sure to do my prep. Everyone's situation is different, but if you're doing prospecting, make the call and figure out what to say while it's ringing. And in order to remove that paralysis by analysis, the insight is obsess over the process and emotionally detach from the results. So it doesn't matter if you actually set the meeting, and it really doesn't matter if you don't set the meeting. All that matters is you make the calls, you make the daily inputs that will lead to your success. It's all about just making the call, so you can extrapolate that out to really most scenarios in life. Asking the girl out at the bar for her phone, or making the introduction, or giving a public speech. Obsess over the process of doing, but emotionally detach from the results, because that's where most people get lost, is they want the result, but then they get lost in between the mechanics of the how. Don't worry about that. Just start doing it, and you will figure out what to do along the way.
So good. Detach from the outcome. Just do. And I still make cold calls as a AE, and that's something that I can apply right now, or not right now. I'm not going to make a cold call right in this moment or after this, but on Monday, I'll probably make some cold calls. I'm looking forward to just making the calls and analyzing less. Super good stuff.
And the way I like to describe it, really to bring this to life, is most people would agree they think pretty clearly in the shower, right? You're pretty meditative. You're a little bit more creative.
In a peaceful state.
You're like, I'm kind of rubbing some soap on my body. The water's really warm. No, I got that coconut. It's
right.
It feels good. And that's how I approach cold calling. I'm very much in a meditative state. I'm sitting there completely indifferent, unrattled. I don't really care what's happening. I'm just sitting there, I'm pressing calls. I'm not checking Instagram feed. I don't even have social media on my phone. I'm just sitting there making the calls. If I get someone on the phone, then I'm going to execute, and it's scripted. I'm not even thinking about it. It's second nature. It's intuitive. And when people are worried about, oh, I got the script, I got to make sure I sound right, oh, I hope they don't tell me no, that's when it's not intuitive. And that's when it's very mechanical and it's robotic and it just doesn't work. So you got to get out of your own head and just sit there. And who cares if you set the meeting or not? What, are you going to get fired? I got fired. It's not the worst thing to happen.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Might just...
So someone 1,000 miles away is going to tell you, not interested. Oh, yeah. Okay. Bye. I'll call you again in a month.
Yeah. And they forget you. And then you set the meeting and they realize, wow, this Trent Dressel guy is an amazing dude. And I actually think at the end of the day, when you eventually, if you're persistent, especially in enterprise sales, you can show someone like, I'm a decent dude, I want to help. And they eventually will buy from you. Like they could go with the competition, they could tell you no. And with enough persistence, you can get the result. So
I've called a prospect. I remember a VP at a credit union. I called him 47 times over 2 years.
Yeah.
47 times. He even answered the phone a few times throughout. He agreed to my meeting one time, like a year before. But I'd get him on the phone. He'd act like he had no idea who I was. One time, he's like, I'll take your meeting. And we set up a meeting. He's like, hey, add Glenda to the call. Glenda is the director who I'd called 34 times. She also didn't want any part of what I was doing. We get on that first meeting. Keep in mind, I called them both collectively over 70 times over 2 years. These are executives at a big credit union. And on that first call, I make sure to make a joke. I say, guys, I know I've reached out to you a lot, but I really appreciate you taking the time. And they tried to play it off and act like they're just like, let's stay cool with it. And they ended up buying. Literally 2 months later, they bought a 3-year, $60,000 TCV license. So average $20,000 recurring revenue a year. And then the VP ended up retiring a month after. But I think he respected that I had been so persistent that he's like, let me get this guy in and then I'll retire. And that was it.
That's earning the meeting. That's earning the deal. I love that you have a sense of humor. You're telling them, I really want to talk to you. Like you're a priority. And you know, like I'm sure you brought value, right? You showed you're a halfway decent dude and you're not just like, yeah, you want the deal, but you're not transactionally minded. But
and we ended up getting on a texting relationship. He literally set us up in the system and then retired.
That says a lot.
That says a lot. He was such a cool guy, but he wasn't very cool the 2 years trying to get a contact with him. But the point is, you're not going to offend someone by doing your job. The way I think about it is, it's almost, and I sort of learned this from Alex Hormozy, but I also had viewed it similarly. But cold calling in particular in sales, it's like playing the lottery, in which you can keep playing, but you have no risk of losing. What is your downside if you make too many calls? Oh, you spend an extra hour making calls today? Well, what is your upside? You'll hit the jackpot by getting a meeting that can change the trajectory of your life and your career.
Agreed.
It's like playing the slot machine. So that's how I view it. It's gamification. It's like gambling, but that is a productive vice to have, opposed to gambling on some sport game, placing teasers, waking up Monday morning in a hole, worrying about paying your bookie Tuesday, and you got to hit the right bet Monday Night Football. So that's another story for another day. Yeah. But it very much is like gambling, doing sales. Unlimited upside.
That's the thing. It's a healthy type of gamble. It's the place where living takes place in the realm of risk. Like that's where you get the outsized gains. You get that one customer to pick up that leads to a $10 million deal. One of my biggest deals at Google Cloud with OfferUp started with a cold call. And I didn't even immediately get the meeting, but I earned the opportunity to follow up in a few months and eventually did. And it led to a big deal. So what I'm getting from you, Trent, is just the idea of what could go right. Like focus on that. And the downside is basically nothing, right? Have you applied that mindset in other areas of your life, like entrepreneurship? And I know you're now evolving into just even beyond tech sales, right? I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, let me tell 2 stories with this. Cool. So specifically to sales, and I'll tell one beyond it, is I remember I was an account executive, a senior account executive at a big software company, $875,000 annual quota. So real role.
That's solid.
Yeah, real role. Over $205,000 OTE. So it's a real role. And I remember I was in a one-on-one with my manager, and she pulled a list of all of my existing customers. And she said, hey, if you could just get every one of these 10 customers to spend an extra $5,000, that's $50,000 in new quota relief revenue that would probably get you up and over your number. great idea. But I remember in the moment I was thinking, well, I've kind of spoken with them. They don't want anything to do with me. These guys are not going to renew. They're not happy. These guys are having a support issue. So instantly when I saw this idea, I ruled it out because I was focused on what could go wrong. And then I reflected on it. I said, that was a terrible mindset by me. Let me focus on what could go right. And I was like, that's such a good idea. Let me just call them up and see if I can get them to spend more money because it's focused on what could go right. So I now find myself outside the confines of a W-2 job. I have no manager. I have no meetings I have to be on. We don't even have a website as a company. We don't have a CRM. We have no tools. I'm a one-man sales army. That's why the way I think about it. So I have to remind myself every morning that I'm one call away from changing the trajectory of the business. I'm one new relationship away from improving everything. So that is the paradigm in which I view the world from, is what could go right. Because if you're worried about what could go wrong, then it's going to lead to this state of inaction. So it's all about what could go right. So I now try and put myself in those uncomfortable situations. I do things that I don't always want to do. I act when I don't feel like it. I recognize that no one's going to show up and knock on my door and say, hey, do you want to grow the business? I'll do it for you. You can just keep laying in bed and eating chicken wings, watching YouTube videos. No one's going to come do it for you. So I recognize that I have to go make it happen. And that's in that state of, you got to be optimistically ready to go and focus on what could happen in the upside.
Yeah. I see you, especially meeting you in person, is a walking commitment to greatness, producing the results. That's what you are, man. And, it's just manifested in the actions you take, cold calling, now growing your business. There's no question you're going to succeed in whatever you do. And obviously, cold calling plays a role. What could go right? You might get that, whale customer that picks up and transforms the business. So let's blend now into talking about a cold call script. And I know you said you don't overthink it. So just high level, like even in your current role with your family business, just some actionable tips on how someone can think about, starting a cold call, maybe a value prop, and closing. Yeah.
Let's start at who to call. Because most people, I don't know where you're starting, but let's start with who you call.
Point.
So
let's take a step
so
back.
So think about, are you B2B sales, business to business, or B2C sales, business to consumer? If you're business to consumer, it's most likely very transactional. You're selling a vacation package or some little item that you're trying to convert them on the phone or get them to sign up. I'm not going to focus on that because that's a whole different motion and that's different. B2B sales, where you're selling business to business, calling to another business, you typically have higher deal values. So you're not just, it's not a one call close. It's let me get them on the phone to start a sales cycle. So you start by identifying who is your ideal customer. Who is your ideal customer? Is it a software company I should be calling? Is it a bank? Do they have 5,000 employees? Do they have 500 employees? Are they geographically located near me? Are they in a different country? So you got to identify what companies you are targeting. Because if you're not very certain in who you're targeting, then you will be uncertain when you're making the calls. So be very clear on the company you're calling upon. Companies are just large groups of people. So what people within that company stand to benefit from your product, service, good, solution? Identify who is your ideal buyer persona. Is it the HR department? Is it the procurement department? Is it the IT department? You must understand what is their day-to-day. Are they a salesperson? Do they have a quota like me? Do they care about pipeline and revenue? Are they an HR person? Do they care about attracting, retaining, engaging their employees? What do they care about? And until you have those two pieces of information, once you have that, then you're ready to start making calls. Because once you're ready to make calls, you're certain on the account you're going after, you're certain on the buyer you're going after. And then once you call that specific buyer, maybe that you're going top down, you're reaching out to executives, VP, C-level, or you're going bottoms up, manager, directors. It's slightly different talk tracks for each because they care about different things. So these are all considerations you must keep in mind. But the single talk track that I recommend that I've used for 60,000 outbound cold calls, and this works for any product, any industry, because I've personally used it to sell software, over $1 million in recurring revenue, and now over $50,000 in pharmaceutical containers and medical supplies. So it works, I would say, and we'll do a brief role play.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, this is Trent from D&D Wholesale. How are you?
Doing all right. Tell me, why are you calling?
It's great to hear, Chris. The reason I'm calling you specifically is I noticed that you oversee human resources at Audio Technica. Is attracting, retaining, and engaging your employees, is that a priority for your team this year?
I mean, well, obviously that's my role.
I figured it was. We specialize in helping groups just like yours to better collect feedback from their employees so that they can make better decisions to drive those outcomes. Being that this is a priority to you today, let's set up an introductory meeting so that I can talk about your top priorities and introduce how we might be able to help.
I mean, I'm pretty busy and we're already, we have a solution in place.
I'm not expecting you to change today, but I imagine at some point in the future, you may want to revamp your program or see deeper outcomes. So what I'd love to do is share what we're seeing as best practices in the market, and maybe you can implement those to your programs today, or when you're in a position to look to change, we might be the right partner for you. Just looking to start a partnership.
Well, I guess you make a decent point. I do want to keep my options open. So
let's do it. Well, is Chris at audiotechnico.com still the best email to reach you?
Yeah, you got it.
Good. So on that call, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the recent industry trends report that we just released, because I think that will be useful to you right now. I'd love to talk more about how your program's working today, and I'll introduce how we can help. If we both agree there's alignment, we can continue the conversation. If not, we can part ways. How does that sound?
That's fair. It sounds good.
Sounds good. Well, I look forward to speaking with you. Boom. That's
insane.
Well
done, Trent.
That's how I do it. And you hit me with the objections, which doesn't make it easy.
I put you in a pressure cooker. You handled that very smoothly.
Yeah,
that was really good.
I hope you clip that out, because that's how you make a cold call, regardless of what you're doing. I'll break it down, the components for you.
Let's do that.
You got to nail the first 5 seconds. Everyone loves to think about that. And there's a lot of goofy things out there people are telling you to do. People are saying, hey, this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up? Can I have 27 seconds? Are you not having a not bad day?
You're right. There's too many options, and I fall into the trap too. I've got like 7 openers, and let's be real, you don't need that many.
When you're calling a C-level at a reputable company, you're saying, this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up? Do you have 27 seconds? Are you having a bad day? Like, these are they're very gimmicky.
Yeah.
So I've found to be very straightforward, very transparent. Hey, Chris, this is Trent from my company name. How are you? Good. No matter what they say at that point, they may say, I'm doing well. How are you? If they do that, you know you're in. If they don't, you know you got to get into it immediately. So that beginning is going to tell you a lot about their current state. So then I immediately get into the reason I'm calling you specifically is, and you always got to give them the reason you're calling, because they want to know who you are, what you want, why you're calling them. The reason I'm calling you, and this is where you can play with it a little bit. If you're low level, you're going to say, I'm following up on a recent email. Does Audio Technico ring a bell? You probably don't want to. If you're calling low level people, maybe that will work. But the way I start is I lead with a value-based opener. I know Chris oversees human resources, and I know that they have to care about attracting, retaining, and engaging their employees. Those are business outcomes of my solution. They're not features. So think about what outcomes you're selling. Lead with that. Get them to say yes. Validate what you're trying to share with them is relevant to them, which we've done. Then you can get into your opener, or your value prop. We work with companies just like you all day to help them achieve this. Quick, go into the call to action. And that's what you do. And a few tips between that. If the call feels rushed, it's you who are rushing the call.
Yes.
So you see, I control my pace. No matter what he hit me with, we're not interested. I'm not expecting you to change. And that's the meta response to any objection. You acknowledge what they say. I know you don't have any budget. We're not talking money today. Hey, I know you're very happy with that solution today. Hey, I know everything's all good. You're not expecting to change. You acknowledge that to diffuse it, take off the pressure, and then reaffirm your intentions. Look, I want to be your partner. In order for me to do that, we got to talk. And I want to understand your world and share with you best practices, because I'm a thought leader. And what I have to say, you got to care about. And that's how you approach it. You got to lead with value.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
So well done. And one thing that really stood out to me was your tone. Your tone. You were confident, but you weren't over the top. Your voice did not waver, right?
Never.
That's actually very important. Imagine I'm like, Hey, Trent, like, I mean, that was too dramatic, but a high pitched voice, like nervous, talking too fast. Like you said, we rush ourselves. I've done that. I know I felt internally like I was rushing. So speak more on tone, pacing, those things that are behind the actual words.
When I first started, I'm in an office with 30 other SDRs, and we're within arm's reach of each other. So everyone can hear your calls. So I learned early on, I got to get over this fear of people hearing me and me freezing up or worried about anything. So I would just rip off calls all day. And there's nothing like showing up in the morning. It's 8:15, 8:30. Everyone's in the office. Everyone's just getting started. And you're the first one to start making calls. And you get someone on the phone when everyone's sitting there on their computers, not on the phone. So naturally, they're not sitting there paying attention to you, but they can hear you. So when you have that spotlight on you, that's when you got to show up, and you got to deliver. And what I found is people said I sound like a used car salesman. They said, you talk so fast. It's because I was worried about the outcome. I was worried about what could go wrong. So I started to say, you know what? I don't even care if I set the meeting. I care about making the calls. I care about, at the end of the day, being top of the dashboard of activity. That's all I care about. So in order for me to achieve that, I got to make a lot of calls. So then I got the feedback because we would review my calls, and you'd always get the objection at the beginning. Who are you? How did you get my number? I'm running into a meeting. And then the prospect is trying to rush you off the phone. They're trying to brush you off. So then you say, oh, okay, well, and then you're already at
panic mode.
You're panic mode.
We've all been there, anyone who's made cold calls.
And you have to get through that stage. And I realized if the call is ever rushed, it's not me rushing it, it's the prospect rushing it. And I can't control that, but I can control my tone, my pitch, my pace. So I will never allow the call to be rushed, no matter what they try. If they hit me with one of those objections, I'll say, I know I called you out of the blue. May I have 30 seconds for me to tell you the reason why I called you, Chris?
That's again, the tone. It's comforting, it's chill, it's confident.
You can't go away easy.
That's the inner game, by the way. You have to be very confident to be there.
You have to get your mentality right. Yeah. Like you're ready to help, but that will overcome any objection at the beginning. Don't go away easy, because they need to believe if they brush you off the phone, you will be calling them back. So they need to deal with this right now. And then once you get it,
point.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's what I would always say. If they would say, can you just call me back? Or, hey, I don't really want it. I'd say, look, can I have 30 seconds for me to tell you the reason why I'm calling you? And most of the time you'll get it. And then you go on the reason I'm calling you. But it's all about being authentic to you. I'm not trying to, I played a lot of video games as a kid, and we'd be in the online chat rooms. I had the mic. So I really think I honed that of being in those chat rooms, like talking a lot of shit with people, cool. Like all of that. I really think that's what has allowed me to develop this, along with doing it for so many calls. But you got to find what works for you, and what's natural, and what's pleasant, and what's friendly. And that's what will resonate with prospects.
I like with the objection, you diffuse pressure. I'm not expecting you to change today, right? And you even gave a couple other examples, but at the end of the day, you had a great tone, you were confident, you got to the point, and executives need you to get to the point. They're busy, you're interrupting their day. This is why I'm calling. You shared relevant problems in their world. That's valuable. And at the end of the day, I took the meeting, and I was trying to act like an actual prospect, put myself in those shoes. I took the meeting because it does make sense to know about my options.
Totally.
And you talk to customers that I don't in my day-to-day as the prospect get to talk to. So you are a thought leader. You called yourself a thought leader. If you take pride in your job, you actually are learning all the win stories and the insights of what's helped other customers.
That's why I said, at the very least, you will learn new things that you could implement in your program today.
Yes.
It's such a good line to frame it like that. And I remember one day in particular, I had about 50, 75 accounts. I'm calling big billion plus revenue financial service accounts at this stage of my career. And I remember just sitting there frustrated. And there was a sales manager sitting next to me. He wasn't mine. And I said, man, all of these guys either have something in place today with a competitor, or they just don't believe in doing what we're trying to sell them. And he's like, that's your biggest opportunity, because if they have something in place, call expecting that they already have something in place. Because if they don't, then you can turn it on them and say, if you're not thinking about this, all your competitors are. You got to learn more about what's happening right now, and that's what we can deliver to you. But most of the time, these accounts you're calling are already doing something, and they're already using your competitor that has more resources, that's ranked better on G2. So you already feel like you're at a deficit. So I realize if they're already doing your thing, whether a homegrown solution or with a competitor, it validates to you that they believe the problem you're trying to help them solve is important, and they're doing something today. They've allocated resources to it. So that's a great thing. So you call assuming they're already doing something, and you lead with that partner paradigm. Hey, I don't expect you to change today, but there will come a point when you're up for renewal. You're currently doing this today. Let's just talk about how it's working and share with you different ideas for how you can think about it. And that's the ultimate way to diffuse it, no matter what objection you get, because you're actually leading, not trying to disrupt anything. You're trying to add to them. And then from that, you can then set up a great conversation to start to understand, well, what is the before scenario? What are the negative consequences of that? What are they missing? Okay, well, how do we differentiate from that other provider? What are their weaknesses? What are our strengths? Vice versa. And then start to position yourself, because it's a long sales cycle. It's a long game. It's not pick up the phone, get deals. This is a many, many months, many, many year long-term thing. And if you're playing the long game with it, then that's the right approach.
Well, cheers to playing the long game, man. Clearly, you're a long game player. That sounds funny. But you know what? One other question on cold calling, then let's talk about breaking into tech sales. We got to hit it. You've helped a lot of people do that, which is pretty amazing.
More than 1,000.
Yeah, so we have to dig into that. Part of that, though, is going to be that people learn how to make cold calls. Right now, they can go into cold call role plays and interviews. They can go on the spot with a hiring manager. What you're sharing is super valuable. So the last thing on cold calling is how has that improved your life, like your cold calling skills? And I'm gonna plant some seeds of what I think is like. I bet it's made you a lot more confident and courageous. And I'm just curious, though, to now turn it over to you. What has cold calling taught you in your broader life?
Learning a skill that you can be paid for is great. I realized early on cold calling, specifically prospecting, would be the foundation for a successful sales career. So I dove headfirst all into cold calling. I made a lot of cold calls. It allowed me to make money, which then allowed me to earn different freedoms in my life. But outside the office, from a content perspective, I can now talk about what I have expertise in, which happens to be cold calling, happens to be something I like to do. I've developed a course with cold calling that's generated me tens of thousands of dollars. And that transcends outside the office, because all of a sudden you start to help people in a different way. You start to delink time for money, which is really cool. But specifically to learning the cold calling, I do believe from a communication standpoint, it's increased my confidence and my ability to articulate a message succinct and concise. I can speak direct and say exactly what needs to be said. Because what I learned early on, listening to other people, is the best people in the beginning, when I wasn't very good, they were able to say more with less words. So I now am always thinking through that perspective of how do I communicate what I want to say in as few words as possible with the most effective tone, direct. And I believe that is an effective way to communicate, because I've learned that's how you get people's attention, you hook them in, and then you must make your ask. Because if you do not ask, you'll never receive. So whether it be making a cold call to a restaurant to try and get a reservation, or you're in the real world, that fight or flight amygdala response of confrontation, I believe I can deal with that better than as if I didn't make the cold calls. Because I know in the cold calls, I'm expecting to confront someone that does not want what I say. And if you look back on this from a historical perspective, we evolved in tribes of 150 people or so. And if you conflicted with someone in the tribe, you were at risk of being basically kicked out of the tribe, isolated. And if that happened, your chances of survival are very low. So most people have a high degree of agreeability, meaning they want to please other people. But the people that are most successful actually are willing to be disagreeable so that they can get what they want, because that you have to swim against stream in a way. So when you're on the cold call, you're calling a busy executive that does not want to speak with you in that moment. And in the real world, when you're interacting with people, you will face moments of tension when you're up against someone who doesn't want to comply what you want them to do. So being willing to lean into that and not flee, not fight, not get overly emotional, and just say, hey, here's what I want, and let's do it. And then that's, I think it's a way to get more of what you want out of life.
Yeah, you got to ask for what you want in life. And I also love that cold calling's helped you be more concise. That's something that I'm working on all the time because I'm a wordy guy. It's just how I am. So it's a good reminder for me, for the whole audience. I've noticed that brevity shows up in your LinkedIn posts. That's one thing I love about your posts that stands out from all the thought leaders that I follow. There's a lot of folks I follow. You're really crisp and to the point. So quick shout out to the audience. If you're not already, you probably are. Follow Trent on LinkedIn. He's always putting out nuggets and value. And I want to link your course on cold calling. Obviously, you gave us a clinic already, but what's the name of the course? So we're going to have it in the description of the video.
Yeah, it's softwaresalesguide.com. That's my website. So you can find it on there. And it's a two-way street on LinkedIn. You can connect with me. We can message. I respond to everyone.
Yeah.
It's not just follow it. And that's what I love about LinkedIn. It's a great way. It's some of the best. I feel like that's how we got connected. And some of the people I like the most and admire the most and want to spend time with, it's all through LinkedIn.
What a beautiful community.
Because you can quickly filter through who you resonate with, who you vibe with based on what they're sharing and saying. Because chances are, if you like their content, you'll probably like them in real life.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad we connected in person. That's the beauty when LinkedIn transitions to person and you're doing a podcast, having fun. So, hey, let's talk about getting into tech sales, right? And we had a one-off conversation. Guys, sales in general is an amazing path. It's an amazing skill. You don't have to be confined to tech sales. I talk about tech sales all the time on this channel, but you can apply sales everywhere, but it's a good path. It's lucrative. It's dynamic. And you've been doing amazing work with course careers, helping people start their careers. So let's talk about the beginnings of, like, you discover tech sales is a great path. Where do you start? Maybe it's a resume, maybe LinkedIn, like we're talking about, it's a great platform, but where do you start when it comes to breaking into tech sales?
You don't need experience. You do not need a degree. You do not need connections. You do not need any of these prerequisites to get into tech sales. Baseline. Anyone can get into tech sales no matter where you're coming from, no matter what age you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what your name is. So you must believe in that. That is a fundamental truth. Once you get to that point and you realize I can do it too, and this is what I want, which you must believe you can do it and you must want it. You must be committed to seeing it through. Once you're at that place, then there are practical steps you can follow that I'll talk about right now.
One second. Actually paint a picture of, you said once you're committed, you obviously need a strong why. What was your why when you broke into tech sales? Or that'd be helpful. The
way I got hired is I was a senior in college and I hadn't really done a whole lot up until that point. I was in a few student organizations. I dog sat the previous summer. I did some one-off jobs like painting, mowing lawns. That's what I did in the summers. I was a nanny for 2 of the 4 summers in college. Yeah, for 2 small kids. I was a nanny. I take them to the movies and like that's what I would do.
Nanny to tech sales.
Yeah, and I mowed lawns one of the summers too. That's what I did. So that's what I did. I did one-off jobs. So I never came from this traditional, I've got all the answers figured out. My dream at the time was to get a sales job in a big city. That was the dream. And I would start writing it down every day. So what I did was I was in college. I was in a sales program that I was not very active in. And I heard that we were having a career fair. So very lucky. Not everyone has access to resources like that. There's 50 companies coming to campus to try and hire people in that student organization for sales jobs. I looked at all the companies and I filtered out who was hiring for sales jobs outside of Ohio. That was it. Once I had the 7 companies, I wrote them down and I made a point to go up to them at the career fair and say, "Hello, I'm Trent. I'd like to work for you. Can I get an interview?" And one of them said, "Yeah, we're doing interviews tomorrow on campus. Let's talk." And that's what started my candidate process for the software company I began my career at. But I also spoke with dozens of other companies. I did dozens of interviews. I was rejected a lot of the time. I got an offer at Camping World. I almost sold RVs. I got an offer at a manufacturing company so I almost moved to some random dark Midwest town to sell whatever turbines they were doing. I feel like tech chose me. I didn't know what it was or the benefits of it. I never had access to information like this.
Interesting.
It just seemed like I had the best experience speaking with those recruiters. And culturally, it felt right to me. It just intuitive, it felt right. It was a $40,000 on target earning SDR job I accepted.
40,000 on target?
40,000 on target.
Like that wasn't your base.
40,000 on target earning. It was like 39,000 something. They ended up updating it to like 50,000, I think it was, maybe 60,000. But it was a low. But I didn't have any sense of what I should be making, or I didn't have information like this to know what to look for. Because if I knew what I know now, what I would have done earlier on is I would go for all the big dogs. I would apply to Salesforce. I would apply to HubSpot. I would apply to the top 50 software companies.
Snowflake
to start. Snowflake. I'd apply to all the best companies.
Ones.
Yeah, that's what I would do. But I didn't know that I could do that.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I love that, like what you would have done if you knew what you knew now.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Totally.
So, yeah. Okay. And so I love how direct you were. You're just like, you asked for an interview. Going back to the theme of ask for what you want in life. And when similar thing, I was in college and Oracle came to campus and I went to the recruiter, Sean, and I was just like, bring me in. I'm going to make it happen. I was like really in a zone at that moment. I was confident and I kept it simple. I wanted to interview. And I think there's just beauty in that. And I'm curious if you have ideas to riff off on based on what I just said, feel free. But I also wanted to ask you about how we could apply this directness to like outbound networking on LinkedIn for folks that don't have a career fair, or like how to create warm inroads. So
I want to close the loop on that for someone that has none of the degrees or connections, doesn't have access to a college career fair, which a lot of people don't. How do you break into tech sales if that is your objective? So if that's the objective, you got to start writing that down every day. I have a sales job, and be very clear on what you want. Do you want to work fully remote? Do you want to move to a new city? Do you want to be hybrid? Do you want to work for a big company, small company? You got to be very clear on the intention, opposed to just blanket applying to hundreds of companies, auto apply. That never really pans out well for most people.
100% agree.
So what you do, and what I'd recommend, is you are deploying the same set of sales skills to get a sales job as you are in the sales job. Think about that. So you will be selling yourself. You are the product. You are the outcome. What problem are you solving? You're solving the company's need to generate more revenue and to hire for that specific role. So you need to understand what you would be doing. And when they ask, hey, so Chris, why should I hire you? Why are you different from the 100 other qualified people with a bachelor degree that want this role? You got to be able to answer that question. So to put yourself in that position, it's the same thing as a sales process. Treat it like a sales process. Who are the top 10 companies you want to work for? Write them down. What job in those companies do you want? Link that in your Google Doc, whatever you're doing to track this. Apply to that job. You're just going to submit a resume. Once you apply, here's what you do to differentiate yourself. And this worked for me. Identify who within the company could be responsible for hiring that position. So you want to look for talent acquisition, recruiters, hiring managers, and then additionally, the actual sales leaders, the team you may be on. So the director of sales development, SDR manager, sales manager, VP of sales. Get all of these people in a spreadsheet and start reaching out to them. And what I'd recommend doing, and this is what I did this summer because I was considering getting back into tech. I wanted it. I did an extensive research process. I said, I want to work for a venture capital funded tech unicorn in Silicon Valley. I'll have an exit one day. I identified the top company on my list. They're selling HR software, which I have experience in. I applied to the role. I connected with 5 different people on LinkedIn. I didn't send them some spammy, hey, let's meet. I just sent them a blank connection request. And then I cold emailed them the next day. I said, are you still hiring for the enterprise account executive position? ? I recently applied. I'm interested. I bring 5 years of software sales experience. I've closed $1.54 million in ARR. Although I don't meet your 10 years of experience, I was way underqualified. Here's a video of me explaining why I think I'd be a good fit. I made an 8-minute video of me selling their product to them. Anyways, thanks for considering me. Hope to hear from you soon. Within 2 hours, I get 2 responses from the VP of sales and the sales manager. They both respond to me and CC on the recruiter. And they say, hey, impressive application. You can meet with Susie, whoever. And then she sends me her calendar link. I get an interview on Monday. I don't end up getting the job, But the point of that story is, if you're willing to do what other people are not willing to do, you can stand out. Because in this market, it's very hard to stand out. Anyone can apply, but not everyone can stand out. You must get their attention and get them to give you an interview. At that point, you're on your own, and you've got to crush the interviews, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this is you got to be excited about the company you want to work for, and you got to be willing to put in 2 to 3 hours of research so that you can then do something like that, because what I just described will work every time. It'll work if you do that.
You know what? You're exactly right. I know someone who got a job at Snowflake, again, a top data analytics company, and they sent a video pitch.
Yep.
Right. That is a differentiator right there. I'm curious, what went into that 8-minute pitch? Was it, just give us a little look under the hood.
Let me give you the specific line you can say in any interview, and this plays into the video. Put yourself in their shoes. What do they want in the new hire they're bringing on? Why would they pay you? Why are they paying you? You are going to generate them, if you're in a sales role, more pipeline, which will result in more revenue. They want to hire 50 sales reps because they know that for each sales rep, they'll make 2x return. So if I'm closing $300,000, they're going to make $600,000 on me. Think about it from the business standpoint. You need to be very clear on why they are bringing you on, so that when they say, so Chris, why Snowflake? You say, look, I am an elite sales professional, and I am fully committed to coming in and generating as much meetings and pipeline for you as possible, leading to revenue. I want to learn. I have a lot of development left to do, so I want to learn from everyone. I want to come in and produce immediately, and hopefully eventually have the chance to be a leader. So what you want to do is you want to display to them, you're very clear on what you are going to do. I'm going to come in and do my job because that's why you're paying me. And you need to sell to them why you'd be a good fit. So in my interview, what I did was outlined my plan to do just that. Here's exactly how I would get meetings for you. I would start by identifying my ideal customer profile. So who is the company's ideal customer profile? I went on their website and researched their current customers. And I'd say, well, based on your current customers, this is the profile I'm seeing. I then went on the website and looked at the testimonials of those customers. Okay, so it tends to, you work with the director of L&D. So I'd reach out to the L&D. Okay, what messaging would I use to reach out to them? So in the situation of a cold call, this is what I'd say. For a cold email, this is what I would say. Here's how I would think about day-to-day activity. And then as far as getting on the meeting, I even pitched my value prop. So based on researching those different data points from the company website, I listened to an hour podcast of the founder, and then I pitched the product. It wasn't great, but it demonstrated that I could learn, and I already understood the mission of the company, who the customer was, who the buyer persona was, what problem we were solving. That is what I tried to demonstrate in the video. And that's what you're doing in the sales job. That's what you're doing to sell yourself to get the sales job.
Yes.
It's all the same process, and it's just demonstrating that because that's what you'll be doing in the job.
Oh my gosh, you're selling yourself and you're earning the interview.
Totally.
What a look in the
most people think it's they reach out with this needy, scarce energy. I hope they like me. I hope I don't screw up. Oh man, I hope I can get a job soon. Oh, I keep getting told no. You are selling your most valuable thing, which is your time, your talent, your energy. You're going to dedicate 40, 50 hours to this company for the next 1 to 3 years, maybe the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So why not really go deep to make sure you feel good about the company? You could show up to the interview. They're interviewing you. You are also interviewing them. It's a two-way street. You could decide, guys, actually, I was really excited to meet with you, but based on what I've heard, it doesn't seem like this is actually the right opportunity for me. Walk away.
Why wouldn't it be the right opportunity for
Maybe
someone?
It doesn't meet your criteria. Maybe you're under the belief that you'll be getting paid this. Maybe you believe you will start as an SDR and your track to promote to an account executive is 6 months, but all of a sudden they say, actually, it's 2 years. Maybe you ask them what percentage of reps are hitting today.
Yes.
Hey, 10%. Hey, can I speak with someone who's doing it today? No, you don't do that. So you got to make sure it's the right thing for you, because the last thing you want to do is get into a company that you are not all in on, and then you're gonna be deer in headlights in the first month and already be thinking about backup plans.
Yeah.
And there's no way for you to be all in and committed and perform at your highest level if you don't want to be there. In my previous company, I wanted to be there. I wanted to grow there. And there was never the moment of, let me just go find a greener grass. Let me just go job hop. It was, I'm going to make it happen here. The most important work is the work right in front of me. Let me do that.
Really strong why, commitment to success, putting in the work. And man, I wish we could see that video application. That'd be fun to see. I could picture you confident, crisp, pitching them. So,
I was sitting there and my mic, the way I recorded it, it was like blurring in and out. It was low production quality. I did one run and I didn't care about it, but I just knew once they saw that, they would say he went above and beyond of what normal effort would be. Therefore, there were hundreds of applicants. They required 10 years of experience. I have half that. I still got the interview.
And what I want to call out is you weren't worried about being perfect, going back to your cold calling mindset, right? Just get it done and going above and beyond. That is one way to go above and beyond. What I did when I got my job at Google is I did a 90-day plan, 30, 60, 90. And they're like, what's this? It was just another way to go above and beyond. So there's probably other ways to do it, but that's the take home message right there. And that only happens, we're only willing to do that if we know we want to work at the company we're reaching out to. And I like what you said about qualifying if it's a fit for you and not being afraid to back out, even if you've already started the interview process. If you find out that this culture isn't a fit, it's not what I expected. So, okay, let's talk about once we've earned the interviewing tips. And there's a lot we could talk about, like, we could talk a little bit about the process, the typical process, like what are the stages of interviews, and then some tactical tips. And then there's mindset too. So what do you want to take a swing at when it comes to interviewing?
The way I think about it is when you're trying to get into these companies, there's going to be the initial phone screening, which you apply, you get a phone screening, typically with a low-level recruiter. If you pass that or whatever criteria they have, you'll advance on to meeting with a sales manager or some leader of some sort. And then you may have a third interview with another sales leader or some manager regardless. So as you think about advancing in those steps, it's just like a sales cycle. The goal is progression. The goal is to get from application to phone screening to whatever is next step in their interview process to offer. That is the progression. So think about it in terms of how many applications have I done? How many interviews have I gotten? How many applications have I sent that have not resulted in interviews? So have I even heard back? Have I gotten rejected? And then how many of the interview cycles you've started have resulted in an actual offer? So you can start to quantify it like that and know that those are your metrics.
Yep.
Those are your success metrics. If you apply to 100 companies and you get 2 interviews, you have a 2% conversion rate there. What can you do to improve that conversion rate? If you're committed to the outcome, you'll keep going even if it takes you a year to get the job. So many people. I spoke with a guy the other day and he had just moved to a city. He's like, I got to get a job to pay rent. And I know I'm settling, but I have to get a job. You don't want to put yourself in a situation like that where you have to settle for a job or an industry you don't actually want to be in. It was kind of sad to listen to. So that's another point about structuring your life in a way, but those are the metrics that matter to get it. And the way I like to think about it is you are there it's an audition, and most people think in terms of people are working against them or it wasn't fair. I didn't like the vibe there. The people you're speaking with, the recruiter, how do they get paid? Their incentive is to hire quality candidates. And for those candidates to stay at the company 6 months, they want you to succeed. Think about that. They want you to succeed. So how do you help them succeed? You prove to them that you're the best candidate for the role. So you got to really understand the company, the product they sell, how they make money, their competitors, have specific examples of stories to point to that align with their current cultural values, that align with their expected sales process. So these are all table stakes. And if you don't know or you're not doing these things, then there's no way you will be able to differentiate yourself against someone like myself or Chris who knows how to do these things. You got to be able to do it. So when you are displaying this understanding, at the end of the interview, I think that this is important. It's just like a sales cycle. Most people say, oh, great, thanks so much. I look forward to hearing from you. And then 2 weeks later, they're sitting there scratching their head, wondering, did I pass? I haven't applied to anyone new because I really want that one. It's all about progression. So you ask them, look, really great. I really enjoyed our conversation today. What are next steps in your candidate process? You ask them that, and they're going to say, well, we're going to go back and we're going to review and talk as a team. Fantastic. Well, I'm really curious. How do you think I did today? Like, what feedback would you share internally based on how you think I did today? Point blank, ask them that. Do you have any hesitations or concerns as to why I would not advance in your process? And you don't want to be too pushy here, but you want to call out the red flags. Understand, hey, Trent, well, I think he did a great job today, but I am concerned about the experience thing. Okay, so can you tell me more about why it is so important for the experience for this role? So start to understand if they have an objection as to why you wouldn't move forward, you need to call that out. You need to call that out and understand it so you can give yourself a chance to overcome it. And then you progress to the next person in the interview process. The interview will be slightly different, but it's all about showing very clear intention, showing up prepared, and demonstrating that you can do the job day one. You're going to come in and be an immediate impact player, even though maybe you're really rough, you have a lot of development left, but you have a lot of desire to come in and be an immediate impact player and show that you have the aspirations of developing in that program, maybe becoming a leader one day, and forecasting how you see your future playing out with that company. And that's very important.
Don't we all have a lot of development left? I certainly still do, but I love the approach. I love the closer mindset. You're getting to understand feedback and if there are any objections so you can address them. You're asking about next steps. It's a red flag if you don't do those things. They want to see that you can go out in front of customers and you're going to have a closer mindset. So really good cherry on top with the interviews.
Yeah. When do you expect for me to hear back from you? Because there's nothing worse than sitting there in a place of no man's land of not knowing what to expect or having clarity. It's just uncomfortable. Yeah. So push them and they're going to say, well, I'll get back to you in a week. Okay. Well, if I don't hear back from you by Monday, I'm going to send you an email, or better yet, I'll give you a call. Yeah. I'll shoot you a text. Something like that. And like, assume you already have the job. That's how I always do it.
I love it. No, assuming you're going to get the meeting or assuming the positive outcome is a great mindset because you step into an interaction or an interview sales cycle more confidently.
And I go into every sales cycle today believing I'm winning this deal.
Come on.
You go in believing you've already won the deal. If you go into the interview questioning if it's going to work, maybe they won't like me, then you've already lost. But if you go in, this job is mine. I know we're going to win this deal. It's just a matter of figuring out the in-between. And then that's when your sales acumen comes into play. But it's a waste of time if you go in thinking anything else.
Yeah, I love your mindset, man. You got me to say, come on, a few times. You're getting me pumped up, baby. But there's another thought leader I look up to, like yourself. His name's Chris Orlob, and he talks about, following up and how hiring managers' calendars and Slacks are lit up like a Christmas tree. So not only do you close in the interview, but it's okay. Like, you're going to have to follow up with the recruiter sometimes between interviews. Don't you think? You need to be a squeaky wheel.
Totally. And maybe they will deliberately put you in a situation where you need to follow up with them. Yeah. But you're going to have to follow up as a sales skill when you are actually selling. So it's a very important part of any sales process, even dating, even
pleasant persistence is what I call it.
Even
dating,
getting
yes.
Even getting family to do stuff. I mean, I always like to say fortune is in the follow-ups.
Yes.
That's where the money's actually made.
Dude, we are cut from the same cloth. I always say follow-ups fuel the finances. I like fortune is in the follow-ups. Amen. And whether it's interviews, whether it's with customers, and dating. There was one time there was a girl that I went on a date with after a month of follow-ups, and hey, it didn't end up being the one, but eventually it happened. So you're exactly right. Last thing on interviewing, and then I want to talk about getting promoted from SDR to AE. I mentioned Brian Forbes. Shout out to Brian if you're watching this, who just got promoted to AE. And I asked him, what should I ask Trent about? He said he actually wanted to know about SDR to AE, even though he's done it. It's helpful for folks. But before we get there, what are a couple common interview questions that you got to knock out of the park? Today, we don't have the time. I don't even know how far in we are because it's been just flying. We don't have the time to hit every type of interview question. There's a lot folks can prepare for, but what are a couple that you need to crush?
I'm going to give everyone one question. It was a question I got. How many windows are in New York City?
20 million. No.
So that's a good guess. It's actually pretty close. But the reason I share that question is because no one knows the answer to that question. you go into an interview cycle not knowing what questions you're going to be asked. So you can prepare to an extent. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your biggest failure. Tell me about our company.
Why do you want to work here?
Why do you want to work here?
Stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they're basic questions, but it's the same thing going into a sales cycle. You can prep all your questions out, but all of a sudden it's going to go in a different direction in which these questions you prepared to ask actually won't be as relevant, and you're less likely to ask them, well, tell me about this. Why? You want to go layers deeper. So I wouldn't encourage people to overthink this. I would think more in terms of your specific stories and your experiences and research in the company. But the reason why I say tell me how many windows in New York, most people will start to laugh and giggle and get embarrassed and be like, 100 million, like something random. There is no right answer, but it's to show them how you think on your feet.
Yes.
Actually, as a matter of fact, there's buses in New York, there's taxis, there's cars, there's a lot of apartment buildings. So I'd say it sort of shows how you process, and you could never prepare for a question like that. So the point is, don't overthink what you will say. Go in loose. It's a conversation. You're just having a conversation, so don't worry about specific questions and how you'll respond. Just think more in terms of what I did was I wrote down 5 specific stories that I had an actual accomplishment. So I could talk about, if they asked me, hey, how do you embody transparency? I'd say, well, this time I did this story and this was the result for it. So I had some stories and I understood everything I could about the company and anything I could about the interviewer. I knew she had a dog named like Brooklyn Bridge, like something random like that.
Tip, by the way, you want to create a personal experience for your interviewer.
I want them to feel. I want them to feel special, and I want to give them everything I can, so it's a no-brainer to advance me in the process. So I was never so worried about the actual questions, but more so worried about just going in loose and having a great interaction.
People buy from and hire people who are confident, relaxed, and also are other-oriented. You were focused on creating a good experience for them. So you knocked that question out of the park, speaking of questions, and you're exactly right. Like having interviewed with Google, and they have these funky cognitive ability interview questions, like they didn't ask me how many windows are in New York City, but there's a dying newspaper company or a private equity firm, and you buy them out. What do you do to turn the business around? They're looking for how you think about problems.
Right.
And not about a perfect answer. So you're exactly.
And if you don't have that business acumen, it's something to start thinking about. Well, what are you doing in your free time? Are you watching TikTok videos all day on dancing, or are you watching podcasts like this one that will prepare you? What content are you consuming that then will shape your worldviews and beliefs? And that's also very important as well.
Yeah. So key action item is check out Trent's content on YouTube. It's gonna be a good investment. Let's go.
Key action items to hit the like button below.
Yeah, give the
Thumbs
like
up.
button a love tap, which is funny what I made up with. Algorithm loves that too. Show this video to more people who could benefit from the message. Anyways, okay, so love it. Tying a bow on interviewing. Let's finish up with the path from SDR to AE. Some tips. We could spend hours talking, but let's pick a few tips on and things that have worked for you, because you did a great job at Qualtrics, man. You moved up to AE. You moved up to an enterprise role too, which is where you want to
Senior account executive. Technically wasn't an enterprise rep, but
love the humility.
Nuance. But I was working with big companies.
You crush it. You made $300K, man. Like that's incredible. So it's
$302,000 of verifiable W-2 income that I posted about. In the first year was $77,000. So it almost a 4X.
So the real deal, man, people want to do the same. So like, what are a couple tips on how to expedite the process of moving on up?
A few things is expediting moving up. I believe that's incorrect.
Okay.
Because most people want to rush it, including myself. I accepted my job being told I would promote in 4 to 6 months to an AE if I did what I needed to do. They decided to change the process day one. They said, actually, we've realized when we promote people too fast, it becomes a sink or swim environment. So we have now prolonged the process. So there's multiple tiers of SDR now, and it's going to take minimum 18 months. And we were saying, oh, okay, well, let's do it. So I got very impatient at times. I believed I was ready to come in and produce as an account executive probably a year before I actually promoted. When I became an account executive, I was ready. I hit my quota the first 8 out of 8 quarters, which was a big accomplishment to me at the time for sure. And the reason why I was able to come in and hit the ground running is because I was an SDR for nearly 2 years. And I mastered prospecting because that is a prerequisite to success as an account executive. And what I learned is that if you are thinking ahead as to, if I were an account executive, then I'd be happier. If I were making this much money, then I'd be more satisfied with my career. If I didn't still have to do this day to day, da, da, da. Once you start playing this if game, you start to lose focus of what is right in front of you. So I realized the most important thing, and it's something I talked about earlier, is the most important work is the work right in front of you. So you got to be so good at what you're doing right now that it becomes a no-brainer for you when it is your time to promote. You will get noticed if you are so good at what you're doing. So you got to control what you can control, and that is your performance in your current role. And then that will alleviate any sort of politics or nonsense behind it, because if you have the results to back up, hey, it's time for me to promote, here's the data. Hopefully your company has it outlined, but you got to produce in your current role. So that's the most important thing. And I'd say the other actionable tip is to express your intentions early. So for example, when I was an account executive, I went 8 for 8 for my first 8 quarters, which is pretty good for most of the account executives at that time. So I was a minimum a year away from promoting to an enterprise account executive. I started setting up meetings with the enterprise leaders, and I'd say, hey, look, I'm an up and coming rep here. I'd like to hear more about what you look for someone on your team. So you see what I'm doing there? I'm trying to learn, but I'm also planting the seed. I'd like to eventually be on your team. And I did that with a few different people. Brilliant. And the second line leader. So they all knew my name. So when it became time to promote, it'd be a lot easier for them to say, okay, let's bring this guy up. I didn't hit my annual number 1 year as an account executive, but I had built the relationship with some of these enterprise guys for like 9 months previously. So I was like, look, I came up short. You think we can make this happen? Like, you think you can get me? Like, I want to come to your team. They were like, you didn't hit your number, you can't promote. So I get it. But I at least was in a spot to have a chance. If I would have hit it, then I would have wrote my own ticket and controlled my destiny. And that's why you got to control the performance. But if you're early in your career, start meeting with some of these AE managers. Yes. And start to understand, well, what are your top AEs doing? Can I come in and sit on one of your deal reviews? Can I sit on one of the team meetings? Can I just understand what you look for so that you can funnel yourself onto your preferred team when the time comes?
Brilliant. You're planting seeds early, being the squeaky wheel, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil, going to the leaders, and maybe even the leaders of leaders.
They influence the decisions, so you got to be cool with them. And if there may come a point where you and your teammate both hit your quota, but they only have headcount for one role.
And they know Trent Dressel. They saw your initiative.
Or maybe it's your teammate that's the one that's setting up all the meetings, and you've just taken a back seat because you like to get your work done in the morning and take off in the afternoons because you're so efficient with your pipeline and meetings. You're going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to the longer term career game, because it's all just a big game.
That's true. You do got to play the game. And we're going to talk about next to wrap this up is the game you're playing now and how you've expanded beyond the tech sales game. And it's so excited for you, man, and that. And so we'll dig into that. But just final comment is that at Google Cloud, I was an inside seller. I got promoted to field sales. That was a good jump. And it's exactly what you're saying. I was networking with the field sales manager while in the inside sales role. I even set meetings for them. I brought value, but I had a couple in-person experiences, understood what they were looking for. And by the time I got to them, when there was an opportunity, I know I got the role over people who were a better rep. Like there was a guy that closed a $50 million deal. And so you do need, like you said, you need to hit your numbers. That's table stakes. And I was hitting my numbers, but also that relationship can give you that extra edge.
Politics really matter.
It matters.
No matter what they tell you. They would always say, hey, we're a transparent organization. We're merit-based. There's no bureaucracy. Politics matter.
There are things
no matter where you're at.
Yes.
The relationships with the right people matter a lot.
And there are just things in life that matter that we can't get around, like some type politics at a company, like having a decent visual presentation, or at least being confident in how you present yourself in sales and life. It matters, right? And so that's just an example. It's just a reality of what it takes. But let's talk about the new game you're playing. What are you excited about these days? What are you up to? And what's your latest vision?
I don't talk about what I actually do often. I've recently started to venture into it, but 5 months ago, I joined my family business. There's 4 employees, my mom, my dad, and 2 warehouse employees. We are a wholesale distributor, so we produce products overseas. We import them to our warehouse in Columbus, and we distribute them to customers across the U.S. It's an entirely different game than what I was playing in software. In this business, there's freight, there's logistics, there's storage. We're doing physical goods. So the entire margin structure is just much different. but in a way, it's very unique. And for a while, I was avoiding committing to it because I kept thinking, I really like tech, software, like that's kind of my whole self-identity. That's what I built my career around. Like maybe I get back into that. Maybe I try and start a software company. So meanwhile, I'm actually doing sales for my family business, like kind of just like going through the motions. And then one day I realized, you know what, this is actually pretty cool. It's a great opportunity. And it's very fortunate to be in a position to enter an existing business that has some profits, some customers, given its very small scale. We don't have a website. Been in business 18 years, no website. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So I came in and have begun to learn the ropes for the most part on my own. I've went to more on-site customer meetings in the last few months than I ever did in the last 5 years. Cool. So it's a new sales cycle, new motion. I'm proud to share I've closed over $50,000 in net new business.
Well done. Running
a sales cycle independently.
That's the key, is net new business. That is hardest thing to do.
Net new business, yeah. So it is very hard to do. So it validates to me it's possible, and it's a bit overwhelming to really take a step back and think I could do this for the next 30 years. I could focus on this business for the next 30 years, and that now excites me to realize, well, what could be possible with this? Because now I'm starting to think a little bit different. When you're in corporate America, you're told, you do this for this long, we'll get you the promotion, we'll pay you this amount of money. People will respect you more in the office because you're a senior account executive now, and it's cool. But you're told and you're confined to a structure. You can make a lot of money in that structure. You can become the CEO of that structure one day and get paid a lot of money, but it's a very long-term game. So what I'm now viewing is when you are on your own per se, it's asymmetric risk reward, meaning we could lose the business tomorrow. Like I see now how the sausage is made. I focus on gross margins. I'm focused on net profits. I'm negotiating warehouse agreements. I'm negotiating freight agreements. I am worried about inventory. I'm worried about a lot more than I was previously. So it's a lot more responsibility because I see, well, if we lose that customer and that happens, we're screwed. But if we could add that customer and do that, all of a sudden we're 10% larger top line revenue year over year. Maybe we hire someone. Maybe we move to a bigger warehouse one day. Maybe we start selling new products. So I now view it as there's all the opportunity in the world, and it's massive upside. It's asymmetric upside. What if we took the business to $10 million revenue? What would that mean for my life, my family's life, what I can contribute? So that's how I now think in terms of, I know I'm going to make it. I know it's all going to work out. I believe I am a mission-driven leader claiming abundance, purpose, and joy for myself, my family, and my community. And that's my intention. I state out every day and what I'm working towards.
And you were living that, man. Like you were helping others create abundance through your content, through course careers, man, and just sharing your journey. Because what people see in you is also in them. So thank you for sharing that vision. That's beautiful. I got chills.
And what I need to add to that is the purpose of a vision is not actually to achieve it, but rather who it forces us to become today. So my vision, growing business to $10 million top line revenue, million subscribers on YouTube, all these other outcomes we talked about, but achieving that isn't actually as important as who it forces me to become today. So who is that president, CEO of that company? How do they show up today? How does the creator with 1 million subscribers on YouTube, like what do they need to be doing today to be that person? Because it's so easy to get lost in, well, what if it doesn't work out? Or what should I actually set that number? Am I thinking big enough? That result is important, but it doesn't matter as much as who you show up as today. So now I'm very intentional every day with who is that person, who is that guy, and I need to be him.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, Trent, that I followed you for a while, got so much out of your content, and to meet you in person, to see you're the real deal and experience how you're being, right? It's pretty cool. So let's wrap up. We could go forever. This has been awesome. But any challenge or call to action to the audience to close out?
An exercise I do frequently is imagine your life 3 years from now. What does it look like? Like, what do you want to accomplish in the next 3 years? It could be anything. You can have virtually anything, but not everything. When you write down what you want, do not worry about the how, or the mechanics of actually doing it. Because most people think, oh, I get hired as an engineer at a fast growing software company or startup. I start a YouTube channel and get all these subscribers, make money, whatever. What is that outcome that is your dream scenario? Think about that. Don't worry about the how to do it. Once you're clear on what that is, that's what you got to be working on. And then all you can focus on is, who does that force you to become today? What is the next logical step to make some progress? Because most people will think about it and then they'll see someone already doing it, and then they'll compare where they're at today to where they want to be. And it's too overwhelming to even start. But that's what I'm now constantly reminding myself is anything is possible for me at this stage. 28, got some money saved up, got some skills, like got a lot of runway in front of me. Got some friends. Anything is possible. So I think in terms of what could go right, anything is possible. I'm not as worried about the how. I'm just worried about showing up today, making progress, and enjoying myself along the way.
Amen. Well, did you ever show up today, man? I feel encouraged, inspired, ready to take action. You got me motivated. I know the audience feels the same. Guys, thank you for your time and attention, for showing up. Make sure to check out, Trent on LinkedIn and YouTube. You're already probably doing it, but just a reminder, check out his cold calling course linked in the description of this video. Check out Course Careers too. Trent's the instructor helping a lot of people start and grow their career in tech sales. And set a vision, take action, and apply everything you learned from Trent today. So to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one.